It's a procedure many of us have a hard time wrapping our head around. Heart transplantation. Think about it, taking a heart from one person and putting it in another. I imagine our grandparents, our parents probably would have never imagined this surgery.
It's a crazy procedure, but actually the first human heart transplant took place nearly half a century ago. According to ScienceMuseum.org, Louis Vashkansky got a new heart on December 3rd, 1967. 3 days later, on December 6th, the first pediatric heart transplant was performed. Today, according to the Registry of the International Society for Heart and Lung Transplantation, about 3,500 heart transplants are performed worldwide. Of those, 350 to 500 are done in children. Earlier this year, one of those heart transplants was performed on a Delmar boy, Brayden Houston. He was only 5 years old at the time.
Wow, and he was born with a rare condition, but the doctors at Nemours AI DuPont Hospital for Children were on standby to give him a new heart with a procedure that's not so rare anymore.
5-year-old Brayden Houston hit a big milestone last week, his first day of school. It's a big deal because 5 months ago, Brayden was given a heart transplant at Nemours AI DuPont Hospital for Children. Brayden was born with a rare heart condition called Barth syndrome, a genetic disorder that causes the heart muscles to weaken as well as growth delays. Not all children with Barth syndrome require transplant, but it became apparent to doctors last December Brayden needed a new heart.
He's the only kid I've transplanted for Barth syndrome. There's probably, I think the total in the country is probably somewhere around, and it's below 100, the number of kids who've been transplanted for Barth syndrome in the country, and it's probably less than 50.
Dr. Ryan Davies performed the surgery. He says transplanting hearts in children is very similar to adults, but the reasons for the transplants are very different.
Most adults have either, usually they have coronary artery disease essentially, and their heart gets sick over time from not having enough oxygen. About half of the kids who need transplants are kids with congenital heart disease, so kids who are born with an abnormality in their heart that for whatever reason ultimately transplantation was felt to be the best treatment for it.
In Brayden's case, his heart was enlarged and he had dilated cardiomyopathy. His heart was not functioning well. Then, on December 17th of last year, he was officially listed on the transplant list.
Sometimes kids with Barth syndrome can live a long time and that can actually get better over time, but in many cases it gets worse rather than better, and it is often what leads to their death.
Brayden's parents didn't want to take that chance. While waiting for a new heart, Brayden was put on a Berlin heart, a tiny heart pump that maintains blood flow in small children. Then, on April 1st of this year, Brayden received a heart transplant. Since then, his mother says Brayden is thriving as a healthy child for the first time in his life. But Dr. Davies says he has a lot of work to do to stay healthy.
I think one of the biggest challenges with kids is more of the sort of after the transplant part is they have to take a lot of medicines, they need a lot of tests over time. I mean, that's one of the things that we always reinforce to parents is that heart transplants are great and they're often the best thing to get people back to the lives they had, but it's not a total cure. It's sort of exchanging one problem for another, and the new problem is that you have a heart that your body doesn't really expect to have in there, and so you're on medicines for the rest of your life to try to make sure that your body doesn't reject that heart.
Dr. Davies says at this point new hearts in kids are expected to last 15 years or more, but that's also a long time for new advancements to be made in medicine.
We also hope that as sort of time goes on that we'll have other options. Every year we get really even better devices that can help poor heart function, so it may be that eventually you might not need a heart transplant, but you might need some sort of artificial, machine that'll help the heart pump.
But for now, Brayden is back to being a typical energetic 5-year-old.
Brayden was in the hospital for only 20 days after receiving his new heart. And Brayden and his mother, Tracy Torbett, are joining us in the studio today. Brayden, how are you? Hi, Tracy. Thanks for joining us. So first of all, give us an update. He looks like he's doing great.
Yes, he actually just started back at his preschool, St. John's, last week. This past weekend, we were able to go to a friend's birthday party and go to Funland for the first time.
Wow.
Since being home.
Well, I'm so happy that he's doing good, but let's go back to when you first noticed something was wrong with Brayden. What were some of the symptoms?
Well, actually, he was failure to thrive. He wasn't able to gain weight, and he was having a hard time even having an appetite in general. So we actually switched pediatricians, and on our first visit, they said to me, "Has anyone ever told you he has a heart murmur?" And I said, "No." So we went up to AI just for further evaluation, and then we found that it was more than a heart murmur. It was the dilated cardiomyopathy, and then his cardiologist did a test to reveal he had Barth syndrome.
And then eventually you found out that he needed a heart transplant. What was it like when you heard those words?
It was terrifying. You never know, when you hear those words, what's going to happen. It's a huge surgery for a child to go through as well as an adult. So it was terrifying for sure.
So it's not just like, oh, you need a new heart, you get one immediately. You're placed on a waiting list. Now, waiting is usually the worst part. What was that like for you?
It was. Waiting was definitely the worst part, and we still had a daughter at home that we tried to go back and forth with, so you never knew when you were going to get the call, so you didn't want to be too far and then get a call and not be there for when he goes into the surgery. So I would say waiting was probably one of the worst parts of the whole process.
But you eventually got that call, and then things really had to start moving from there, right?
We got the call actually when we were in a transplant meeting with our team, and the coordinator left and she came out to me afterwards and said, "We just got a primary offer. So the doctors are going to go this afternoon to go look at the heart." They left AI around 7 o'clock, flew out to evaluate the heart to make sure it was a good fit for him and a good heart, and he actually went into the OR 2:30 the next morning.
What was going through your mind as all this is going on?
A lot. Just what was going to happen next, and how would his new heart accept into his body, and how was he going to recover, and just hoping and praying for the best.
Yeah.
So Dr. Davis mentioned a lot of aftercare is necessary. What has that been like?
We go to AI about once a month, sometimes more than that. Obviously, he has many medicines that he's taken. He's gotten to a point now where his medicines are less. He's gotten weaned off of some, but it's still a lot of care, and we have home nursing. They come in our home and help and just do vitals.
Look at him. He's being a little boy, though. This is that's what this surgery has allowed him to do. He's sticking out his tongue. He loves seeing himself on TV. It's so fun.
Yeah, and of course, do you think about the future? I mean, do you think about the possibility of having to get another one?
I do, but at the same point in time, you have to take it day by day, appointment by appointment, and with our community support and our family and friends and the prayers.
And just to go back a little bit about Barth syndrome, it actually affects the muscles, all the muscles, and the heart is a muscle, right?
Right. It affects all muscles are low muscle tone. So obviously your heart's a muscle, and it was enlarged, which is cardiomyopathy is another trait of the Barth syndrome.
So if he would need a second transplant, it wouldn't be because of the Barth syndrome, right?
Correct. It would be because either the heart is not accepting anymore, rejection, or it's just gotten to a point where the body has recognized that it's not his original heart, and they kind of attack it that way, his body.
But the important thing now is Brayden is healthy. He looks happy. You're doing all right. Can I get a high five? Oh, there you go.
I'll take one too.
There we go. Handing out high fives to everybody.
All right, and they've got power behind them too. Thank you so much, Tracy and Brayden. And of course, if you would like to read more about pediatric heart transplants from Nemours AI DuPont Hospital for Children, go to our website, wdoc.com, click on our picture at the top of the page. As we just heard, everything completely changes when you or a loved one is faced with a life-threatening condition, especially at such a young age like Brayden. It seems like everything else gets put on hold.
But for one teenager who underwent a double lung transplant just to live, she's doing everything she can to avoid letting it get her down. In fact, she's climbing the ladder of success.
For Rachel Sweet, graduation day came right on time this spring.
Rachel Lynn Sweet.
You're thinking, that's nice, but a lot of young people are getting their diplomas. But not that long ago, Rachel didn't know how long she'd be alive.
It was kind of like, you may get sick, everybody's different from this, so we can't really tell you what's going to happen to you.
Her cystic fibrosis was getting worse, and she was getting assignments sent home from school.
I do it in the hospital, which is kind of hard because when you're sick, you just don't feel like doing homework.
And even worse, missing out on fun with friends.
I'd be too sick to really do anything with them, so they would come over, I'd lay in bed, we'd talk, and then they'd leave.
The great news, Rachel finally got a double lung transplant last year. The bad, her junior year in school was all but wiped out, but she stuck with her studies with a tutor.
Rachel from day one always had an attitude of, I'm going to get through this.
Her doctor thinks chasing after that diploma literally distracted Rachel from her fragile health.
You just have to have a goal in mind, and you have to stick with it and think about everything you can do to get you there.
Rachel's mom learned important lessons too. Find a support group and do your own homework.
The internet is your friend, even though people say don't go on it, you go on it. Learn as much as you can and ask as many questions.
Now Rachel says the sky is the limit.
This accomplishment right here tells me what I've done and what I've earned.
Rachel is now heading to junior college, where she says she'll study accounting.
That's awesome. Well, children like Brayden and Rachel who are faced with life-threatening illness often find themselves at the hospital for days, weeks, even months. That's why the Ronald McDonald House of Delaware offers them a home away from home. Hear how it serves as a crutch for families that need it the most.
Well, maybe you need a little help feeling better after an injury. Believe it or not, good old-fashioned H2O could be the answer. Later, we learn more about aquatherapy. Delmarva Life will be right back.